Echo chambers are basically groups of people who already agree with each other on certain matters. It has been said that birds of a feather flock together, and we can see that it would be logical that you would want to be with people who have the same views more or less with you. But if you're in any way a political activist, you would want your political disagreements to be resolved and your political activism actioned. So, obviously, if you want, um, well, just anything. I don't want to get controversial at the moment. You want something done, and your opponents obviously don't want that thing that you want done. How would you resolve this? Obviously, you would argue about it. You would say it should be done because of reasons A, B, and C, and they would say it shouldn't be done for reasons D, E, and F. And hopefully, there would be some way of resolving it so that it is either done or not done, and reasons given. That is really the only way to resolve it. And I know it can be resolved by violence, but let us assume that people would rather not get their, noses broken or their legs broken over something that could be decided by discussion alone. So, the obvious thing to do then is to have the thing resolved. So, okay, not everybody is, top of the tree and leader of, this or that movement. Most people are bumping along at the bottom, knowing that, they want A to happen or A not to happen. And the logical way of resolving this is simply to, all gather in one group and then choose a leader of that group. Isn't it obvious? And then, and the other group who don't want this proposal to be acted on would choose their best person, their best debater, their smartest person to argue against your group about why it shouldn't be done. And if your group is quite a lowly group, you could still keep passing the message up until it gets right to the top, and it gets a vote in Parliament or a referendum or something of that nature. I know in the UK it takes a long time. It took UKIP about 20 years to get a referendum, and even then it was called by the Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron because he knew that the only way to stop himself from not getting a second term was to promise a referendum. And so he won a second term because he didn't want to be a one-term prime minister by promising a referendum. And he thought, well, it doesn't matter what these stupid people choose. They can choose whatever they like, but Brexit won't be allowed. And the flow of immigrants will continue apace, as has proven to be the case. But anyway, I'm saying that there are ways of resolving disagreements, either through war and revolution or through somebody saying, I have won the argument and you have lost, so you do things my way. And to have this done means you have to go outside your comfort zone and argue your case amongst people who are hostile to your views. Isn't this logical? That's what I've been doing. But I don't think other people are doing the same thing. They seem to be in their hug boxes, rejecting or thinking they have the right to veto my proposals. So obviously, if we want to do it in a civilized way, we would have to, have these rules of debate. What you have is a proposer and an opposer, and you make your speech, and then the other person responds to their speech, and then in the third stage, everybody, each party, um, each party uh, sums up the points the other person made and um, argues against it. And then the rule is usually people vote. The people who are in that debating society or who heard the debate vote on who has won or lost, or whom they agree with. I mean, it would be nice to just refine it and expect the people who vote for or against to explain why they voted for or against. So if you want to do it properly, you would have to set, before the listeners go in, it's like, well, what do you feel about this? Do you agree or with a proposition or not? And then they have to say yes or no. And then after the debate, then they have to vote again to see if hearing the different sides of the argument has changed their minds. And that's a way to do it. What is the problem with doing this? I don't think anybody is doing this at all. All we get is, oh, she's a Jew, or he's a Jew, or just completely idiotic accusations being made by men who I know are not children or teenagers or even young people. It's actually quite disgraceful, really. So I'm saying that's how it should be done. So why isn't it being done? I mean, I get the feeling that nobody is even talking about the house. All they're doing is saying, I feel this, I feel that, and they fight with other people interested in the subject by saying, I go first, you shut up, I'm speaking now, go away, and that's it. So they take turns to complain about the situation and discussing the issue, identifying the problem, prescribing the cure is really the furthest thing from their minds. I don't roll like that, of course, but what can you do when everybody else does precisely this? And worse is that you get different people preferring different kinds of social media platforms. The liberals have just flown away to blue sky because they can't stand being on and I guess boomers stay on Facebook, and the young people prefer Instagram, where it is actually impossible to have any kind of discussion other than make a comment in favor and then maybe comment on somebody else's comment, and then you'll have to leave it at that because you won't be able to easily find anybody's comments after the mess. It's just a list of comments. You're not really meant to be having any discussions there. So Instagram is not the place to have any kind of civilized discussion. So as far as I know, it's only X or Telegram, which is all the features of debate, of discussion are present in Telegram, but the quality of debate is really abysmal because people can be anonymous, so they don't really care what they say. And Substack, well, that's really I was building up to, because what you have now is um, this idea of getting people to pay to read your stuff, which is getting people to pay to read your propaganda, which it's just so not the point. Because if you're familiar with um, political parties and pamphleting, this is what political parties do. They give, they issue, um, they have political pamphlets, and they will give it to anybody who will care to take it. And often people who are given the task of pamphleting find that, somebody will politely, if you're offering them a pamphlet, take it, and then they'll throw it in a litter bin a few yards in front of them. And this can be a little demoralizing. So when you tell people your political views, when you give them your political pamphlet, or the pamphlet of your favourite political party, you're just grateful that they take it, and you're even more grateful if they don't throw it in the nearest litter bin after they've taken it from you. You are grateful. You don't expect them to pay a subscription for your Substack. I certainly don't, because it's just a principle of the thing. Because once you start making people pay for your, to subscribe to your Substack, it means they are limited in. They try to monetize things and say, in order to comment, you have to pay. In order to read to the end of this post, you have to pay. In order to watch the end of this podcast, you have to pay. And most people are not going to be paying any money to somebody whose political views they disagree with. So you're not even getting the engagement that you should be looking for, which is crazy. So how are you ever going to resolve the issue? And I suppose they give us all these distractions in order not to allow us to do this thing, not to allow us to resolve our differences. So I see Mike Malzahn is there. I'll give him the link in case he feels like joining. And happy Independence Day to you, Mike. Hi, Mike.
For once we agree.
Independence Day.
Yes.
For once we agree on what matter?
Happy birthday, America.
Right.
We agree that these echo chambers are bad. I don't know how this YouTube is structured. I know that people have memberships, and I guess you're right. If to see the end of the video, you have to be a member or whatever. You're not going to pay somebody you disagree with and boost their pocketbook and whatnot.
Yeah, so it's completely crazy. Yeah. I think it should be differently organized, or somebody should just organize like, as a way of boosting their social media platform. X could organize their own debates, couldn't they? It's like, we're going to give you a prize if you're one of the our top 100 debaters or whatever, and they could encourage people to participate. Mm-hmm. Then I don't know, run the whole thing like the World Cup or undisputed heavyweight championship, whatever.
Right, but who's going to judge who wins the debate? I mean, I watched
Well,
debates between
yes, well,
Muslims and
I've got
Christians.
an idea. I've got an idea because did you participate in school debates, Mike?
Not like official school debates. I mean, like in classes, we had debates. I remember, I think it was in the 8th grade. Might have been like our first debate. We debated abortion. And at one point during the debate, my teacher said, "All right, Mike, you switch sides." And I was like, "Well, wait, no, I don't agree with that side." She goes, I get it, but you go argue for the other side." That was an excellent exercise, I thought. How
Yes.
would you argue against yourself? And, so it gets
Yeah.
you to see the other people's point of view and whatnot. But I remember, what was it? At the ethics class in college at UF, we had a debate about capital punishment. It was pretty funny because I thought the professor, like, first he showed this long video and then he explained why America shouldn't have capital punishment. And his whole thing was, it allows other countries to have it, like Saudi Arabia, even back in the 80s, where they had a bunch of people and stuff. And, well, we give them cover. There's one kid in class, like, raises his hand and he says, but that's not part of what either makes it ethical or unethical, And the professor told him he was wrong. And I started laughing. I was like, no, the kid's right. You're wrong, professor. Your question was, is it ethical? Not the practicality of power structures of geopolitics. But anyway.
Sorry, were you saying, were you arguing about whether the death penalty was ethical? Was
Correct.
that what you were saying?
Right.
But is there a difference between ethics and morality?
No, I think they're pretty interchangeable.
Okay. Because I've always thought ethics was sort of a kind of higher standard than being moral. In that only professional and senior people talk about, ethics, like doctors and, professionals. Well,
I mean, I suppose you could say the Hippocratic Oath would be an ethical thing as opposed to a moral thing. You could be morally trying to help somebody, but you do harm accidentally, although I think it's more like do no harm knowingly. The ethics of, I guess ethics is a bit different than morality. The ethics of, like, recusing yourself if you're a judge because you have a conflict of interest. It doesn't mean you would have ruled incorrectly or immorally. There's just an ethics to it, the whole appearance of impropriety. And, obviously insider trading would be unethical and immoral. Although I guess you could argue insider trading.
Oh, and criminal even now.
And criminal.
I guess. Yes. So these standards change from time to time. So what was, doable without going to jail, it is now a crime. And well, I guess these standards go up and down, and I guess it's quite disorientating if you don't know what's going on. And maybe you're one of those people who want things to stay the same so you can arrange your life according to those rules and not feel silly when, the law changes to the opposite.
Well, it's funny. I was reading a couple of years ago, I think it was, we're talking about, are you allowed to beat your wife in Islam and stuff? And I looked it up. Oddly enough, it was Alabama, 1871, was the first state to make it illegal to beat your wife, that wives were considered property. And, husband, I guess you can't beat them to death, but, it wasn't until...
As a form of physical chastisement. I mean, there was this talk about, the rule of thumb that if you did beat your wife, you shouldn't use a stick thicker than your own finger, something like that.
Okay.
That's where the term rule of thumb came from.
Interesting. Okay, never heard that. I'll have to Google it later to see if you're feeding me false information or not.
But have you heard of my interpretation of that wife beating verse with ceremonial wrist slapping.
With the mastwick? Or are you with the...
No. It's just a slap of the wrist. People
Right.
say,
Well, there's...
somebody did something terrible, and all they got was a slapping of the wrist.
Right. Well, there was a Saudi guy one time was explaining how you can properly beat your wife. And,
yes, it was. He videoed it. He actually demonstrated how to do it. Do you mean that guy?
I thought this was just a speech, and it was in Arabic, so it was being subtitled. But yeah, it's literally a slap on the wrist.
He to be his wife.
Right. I think this guy said, like, you could use a spatula, because it's
that's a different one.
Yeah, I think this is a different one. I don't think he actually videoed hitting anybody.
No, it was just sort of standing over her and wagging your finger and, looking down at her and,
Right.
kind of sort of physically, but not actually hitting her kind of thing.
Right.
In the sort of way that, men, when they when they're squaring up to each other, there's a kind of, ritual, they stand up and then they walk, slowly towards each other and then they say, I'll see you outside, or whatever they do.
Sometimes, yeah. The old days, you pull your belt up a little bit. So, as a woman, and obviously the verse 4:34.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the number 2 punishment?
What do you mean? Sleeping apart?
Yes.
Well, I've heard it said by a Muslim man. It was Khalid actually who said, well, it's actually a disadvantage for the man because he's the one who cannot bear to sleep apart from his wife because his sexual needs are more urgent than hers.
I know some older women would be like, that's no punishment. Thank God.
Yes, leave me alone.
I found it the strangest thing. Like, leave them alone in their sleeping phases. I remember this woman I was dating.
What are they for? Yes.
And she was talking about her Italian friends. They were all mid-30s or 40s. And their husbands all cheated on them. And she's like, the wives were like, yeah, let them. Let that woman deal with the yucky stuff. I'm done with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I found it odd that God would think that's some great punishment to your wife. First chastise them, then don't have sex with them, and
then if they don't improve, beat them. So it's kind of like a verbal warning, a written warning, and a final warning.
But the no sex thing could only encourage them to misbehave more. They may be like, "This is great. I don't have to deal with that jackass."
Well, I guess it depends on who is sleeping on the sofa. So I think it should be if she has a bedroom, she'll probably be happy forever, right?
Right.
Until you up the ante
if he's got 3 other wives to occupy him.
Well, that's unusual. I think. I don't think even Muslim men want more than one wife, living with them all the time. I suppose they quite like the idea of, having sex with more than one woman than always living with them, maybe.
Right. Well, my brother used to import high-end chandeliers, and one time he actually got a job in Saudi Arabia, and he said, they kept emailing, they said, we need 4 sets and they have to be identical. They have to be the exact same. We got 4 sets and they're all the same because he had 4 different houses and they were all decorated the same for his 4 different wives.
Yes, it has to be the same, or because they have to treat them equally. They have to treat them fairly. And I've got this book explaining how, what is a husband to do when he wants to go on holiday and he has all these 4 wives. Does he draw lots, or does he just choose the one he wants to come with him? But then he can't just keep taking just one on holiday with and neglect the others. He would have to take, he would have to rotate the wives he takes on holiday, and then when he brings her back stuff, it has to be of equal value. And it does sound like a bit of a nightmare. But back to the wife beating thing. Okay, so this is just my interpretation, but I'm saying, you've admonished her, you stepped apart from her, and she hasn't corrected herself. So the final thing is the wife beating thing, and I'm saying you don't actually have to beat her, but you could humiliate her by inviting witnesses to a wife beating ceremony. So you have these caterers, you invite all these people, saying there will be refreshments provided. You need them there to witness your actual unhappiness with her, and then and also you want her to defend herself, so that it's fair. So you say, well, you know, you haven't cleaned the house, you don't look after the children, you go dancing every night, and and then she gets a chance to, I guess, explain herself or something, and then at the end you go up to her and slap her on the wrist. But then, it doesn't have to be, this terribly um, hurtful thing. You don't have to hurt her. I mean, you just make sure that everybody has noticed that you're not happy. You made your accusations. You snapped on the wrist as part of the ceremony, and say, well, next time if you don't improve, it'll be divorce.
Right.
And that's it. What's wrong with that? Isn't that fair enough?
It would be fair if the woman has the same rights over the man. If the man's out.
Well, she doesn't even have. But actually, I mean, she can say you haven't. I don't know whatever the marriage contract says that he has breached, because under my system, your engaged couples have to agree a marriage contract, or they won't be allowed to marry.
Okay.
So divorce becomes a breach of the contract.
What if he's not adequately providing for the family?
Yeah, or whatever. If he said, I'll buy you a car every 2 years, or whatever it is, and he hasn't.
Okay, and he hasn't. So does she get to admonish him?
No, she doesn't. No? She could just say, you broke the marriage contract, I'm off.
Okay. Well, what if so it goes straight to divorce?
Yeah, it has to be, I suppose, to be fair, that there has to be, a fundamental term of the marriage contract, or, something that is peripheral, that you can overlook. It's not such a big deal. But, if he breaches more than one of them, maybe can count. I haven't really quite worked it out. I think people might say, well, adultery, is non-negotiable.
Okay. But she doesn't get to admonish him, leave him alone in a sleeping place.
Oh, she probably has. That's the thing. Can you imagine a woman not doing that?
Does she get to publicly invite people over and say, here's why I'm unhappy with you? We're living off welfare. Have you ever seen Sharia councils in Britain? I think it's
Yes, I have seen one in session. I thought it was pretty impressive, and how quickly they dealt with all the problems.
There's a video called, and I think the news organization was called Panorama.
Oh yes.
Have you heard of them in the UK?
And yes, I have, but I haven't seen that particular one.
You should Google it, because they send in a woman with a camera in her purse or whatever, and she's like, he won't work. He just sits around drinking tea all day. We're on the dole. The judge is like, well, give it another month. Are you making him the right food? Are you cooking for him what he wants? This stuff. And she's like, I can't stand to look at him anymore. He's like, no, come back in a month. And that was like her 5th time trying to get a divorce. But apparently when the guy's going, they say, hey, well, I want a divorce. The judge goes, okay. And it's funny you mentioned marriage contracts. I remember it might have been the 80s or 90s. It might have even been on like 60 Minutes. They had this couple on, and they had literally written out a contract, and it literally said, like, they will have sex 3 times a week. She'll keep the house clean, blah, blah, blah. And people thought it was kind of crazy, but No, that seems good. Good to have details. Everybody knows what they're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly doesn't seem like women have the same rights in Islam as men do.
Well, I think if a woman's not happy, she will already be nagging and complaining anyway. And when she
You may
finally,
chastise her for that.
well, I mean, the point is, it will be heard by a third party. Whatever the complaint is, it can't
Not if
be.
he doesn't let her out of the house.
Well, how's she going to do the shopping?
He can do the shopping. You can get Uber Eats or have it delivered.
Well, then what is she complaining about if she doesn't have to do the cooking?
Well, maybe it's just groceries delivered. You guys don't have Kroger's over there to bring your groceries? You guys don't have Instacart?
We do get our groceries delivered by
Right.
Ocado, Sainsbury's, Tesco, and different named
There was a woman
supermarkets.
on, you know, that Ask ZAD guy, Saudi guy. He's got a long gray beard now. Some of his videos, he's not gray.
Mm-hmm.
Hassim al-Hakim, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some woman called in and said, you know, my husband won't let me leave the house. I want to go see my sick mother. You know, doesn't he have to let me leave the house? And he's like, no, he doesn't have to. It may be a sin for him not to, but no, he doesn't have to.
That's surprising. I mean,
Pretty surprised, but
English law has it used to, but now they have no fault divorce, so I guess it doesn't apply anymore. But when they did have fault-based divorce, you could, well, there were certain list of reasons you could divorce your spouse: non-consummation, desertion, adultery, and I think unreasonable behavior, which could cover all kinds of things, I guess.
sure. Irreconcilable differences. You guys not have
Yes.
that one? Right.
Yes.
Right.
But now that's no longer required, is it?
No.
You have no fault divorce in Florida, don't you?
Yeah. You can just say I'm done.
Mm-hmm. But I think
most states you don't have to give any sort of reason. I remember.
Well, I think that's terrible.
When Tom Cruise divorced Nicole Kidman, everybody's like, well, what happened? California apparently has a law that if you've been married 10 years, like the alimony gets kicked up or something. So he divorced her like 3 months before 10 years or something.
Oh, right, without giving a reason.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have to say, I want to protect my money.
Has he? Well, I suppose you could divorce your wife and marry her again.
Yeah, I don't know if it's cumulative or it gets counted, or you restart the clock if she's dumb enough to remarry you. But anyway,
Right.
Back to echo chambers, I guess. It's always good. You guys have Speaker's Corner over there. Is that not still people having good debates, or are they just screaming at each other? But it's funny.
I haven't been for a while.
Okay. So like I watched the debates, you know, like I was on the Orthodox Muslim not too long, a couple of weeks ago or something.
Oh, you managed to get on. Please send me the link.
Yeah, I managed to get on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I asked him whether or not concubines had to consent to sex. And he said yes, but I don't know. I emailed him a couple papers on it. He never responded.
Okay. I have to tell you how I would organize this sort of thing. So under my system, slavery would be reintroduced. So let's say, Mike, you capture slave girls and you don't want to marry them. You have the option of marrying them, but you don't want to marry them. You choose to run a brothel. And obviously, every slave has a right to manumission. And obviously, you would have to allow slavery because there is prostitution, because there is a verse that says, "Do not compel your slave girls into prostitution if they wish to remain chaste." But if they don't wish to remain chaste, if they are prepared to work as prostitutes, then you would have to allow that, and that would be a quicker way of earning, their manumission. And I suppose you could have sex with them and pay them the going rate,
Where
whatever
do you
it
get
is,
if they
and
wish?
it would go towards their manumission.
So
Isn't that fair enough?
well, I'm not sure where you're getting if they choose to remain chaste. The Muslims
If they
I
choose to
always
remain
say-
chaste, and then they'll have to, I don't know, clean toilets, or be secretaries or nannies or whatever it is that,
but
whatever
all the
work you can
Muslims
find
I've
for
ever
them.
talked to said you cannot put your slave into. Now they usually use the word force, but they say it is illegal to make your slave a prostitute, and that's one of their protections. They hate zina, and prostitution is zina, unlawful sex. So what you're talking about?
I know
Divorce
they
or
all
ID?
do that. I know they all do that, but prostitution has a social purpose, right? Because not every man will be able to find a wife,
Sure, it can. Yeah.
and some
I have
women
no
are
problem
prepared
with
to do
legal
it.
prostitution, but I'm not a Muslim. I
Yeah,
think
but
there
I'm
needs-
saying that verse can be interpreted in that way without, you know, without imposing, a meaning that the words do not have. Because if it says, if you don't force your slave girl into prostitution, and you don't, then it's okay. And this means that, obviously you're not going to let her walk the streets, because she's just going to run away, right? So you have to provide for her a safe environment, i.e. a brothel.
Okay, you're in the fourth surah, I would assume. What verse are you talking about?
434, I think.
434.
I think it's something like that.
No, 434 is about beating your wife.
424. Let me see.
424 is about who to marry. Yeah, and all married women except those whom your right hand possesses. This is Allah's ordinance to you, and lawful for you are all women beside those, provide that you seek them with their property, taking them in marriage and not fornication, and not committing fornication.
433.
433. And to everyone we have appointed heirs of what parents and near relatives leave, and as to those with whom your right hands have ratified agreements, give them their portion. Surely Allah is witness over all things. Nothing about prostitution or even being chaste.
Well, it says in my translation, and let those who do not have the means to marry keep themselves chaste until Allah enriches them out of His bounty.
Okay, 425. Sorry, I thought you said 433.
Sorry, 2433.
$425 is
2433.
2433. Okay. $24. The light, and lash those who fornicate. And let those who do not find the means to marry keep chaste until Allah makes them free from want out of His grace. And as for those who ask for a writing from among those whom your right hand possesses, give them the writing if you know any good in them, and give them of the wealth of Allah, which He has given you. Do not compel your slave girl to prostitution. Right. Do not compel her. You're saying, but if she wants to, she's allowed when they desire to keep chaste, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to ask a Muslim next time I get on a channel.
I know they'll give you some sort of funny reason, but I'm saying prostitution has a social purpose. It might, even prevent revolution. Because if you suddenly raise the price of sex, then, well, I think a lot of revolutions are caused by sexually frustrated men.
Never heard that theory. You think Robespierre was sexually frustrated?
Well,
Jefferson had Sally Hemings as a concubine. Had lots of slaves to have sex with. Same with Washington. Well, Martha owned most of the slaves, but I'm sure he could do what he want with them.
well, I
You
was
think
really
Lenin was
thinking.
sexually frustrated? Did Lenin ever marry? Let's see what Lenin did.
Well, not so much the leaders, but I'm talking about the average age of of the country. So
No,
I don't
Lenin
think
was
you'll
like,
get a proper revolution if you're if the average age of your country is over 40, because it's past fighting age.
well,
And once men.
I know what you should Google if you can find it.
Mhm.
August 2014, when ISIS attacked Mount Sinjar. I remember Thomas Friedman was on one of the morning shows, and he's like, "Well, these ISIS fighters, these are just a bunch of young guys. They've never had a girlfriend." He was making your argument, like, yeah, of course, yeah. So of
Well,
course they're enslaving all these poor girls.
I do think that, I mean, okay, why do young men join the army? Because they think women are part of booty, and they're obviously incentivized by the idea of glory and booty, and booty includes women. But a 40-year-old man would not be, as incentivized by these carrots being dangled before them as, a man in his 20s. And I think, well, I mean, you can imagine, if the average age of your country were 60, then, you'll never get any kind of revolution.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the poor still get upset even when they are getting laid.
Well, I think if the
bad.
average, yes, they may complain, but will they actually do something about it? I rather think not. Just because,
You think all the Black Lives Matter guys were sexually frustrated?
well,
Black guys are banging hoes 3 deep.
well, I think yes. I mean, the problem also is that if you live in a culture of casual sex, then you know the sexually sated male is politically inert. That's another one of my theories too. That you won't be able to get them to do anything if they're already, you know, um, satisfied in that department. It's only when you can dangle women and booty before them that they'll take any risks to do anything. And if most men are over the age of 40, then they probably won't do anything, no matter how bad the government.
Okay, I disagree. I think you're putting
Okay,
too much importance on sex. But
but then you're over fighting age, right?
I am.
And there's Jord. Maybe I should invite him to join. Well, the last time I spoke to him, he did have a girlfriend, but I think he'd just broken up with her or something.
Is that the cube you're talking about?
Yes, the cube. I believe that's Jordan, who has a much bigger YouTube channel than me.
Is this channel called the Cube?
It's called Jord.
Oh, okay. Jord.
Yes, but he talks about well, I don't think he talks about serious things. He's always saying in his bright and young voice that everything will be okay and believe in magic, and well, he's a bit of a Pollyanna.
He says he's sexually frustrated, so maybe he's on the verge of revolution.
I don't think so. But that's a problem. I mean, that's the whole point of sublimation. So I think when Western men use sublimation, the more capable of, doing things like, oh, I don't know, exploring the world and, discovering America and having their revolutions and that kind of thing. But no, they'll never go anywhere. They'll never do anything.
Well, yeah, imagine those old seafarers going out for years and years at a time. Or even like, why the Greeks have sex with men, the armies would take off for 10, 20 years.
What did you say? Sorry, about gay sex? Were you talking about gay sex?
The Greek armies, right? And that why they had sex with each
other? Oh,
yes,
the Spartans. I think they had to pair up or something. They had to pair up and look after each other.
Long expeditions without their wives and stuff. I mean, a lot of armies traveled with their wives at different points in time.
Yes. Yes, their wives and children would come with them, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
They would sort of travel as a camp or something.
Depends on how far the battle is. But if you're Alexander and you're trying to conquer the whole world, you can't be slowed down by a bunch of families.
No.
But I mean, like, you're familiar with the hadith of coitus interruptus, right?
No, I'm not.
No,
do tell.
That's the one I started with on the Muslim, the Orthodox Muslim. It says, the boys are out on jihad, and they'd taken some Arab, pagans as captives, and so they wanted to have sex with them, but they were concerned about their ransom, right? Nobody pays good money for a woman who's been clearly defiled, so they don't want to get them pregnant. So it's actually, the term in Arabic is AZL, right? To withdraw. So they're going to do that, and they had, I guess, maybe they were fairly new to Muhammad's, revelation or something. They're like, well, hang on, Muhammad's with us. Let's go ask him if it's okay. And he says, he's like, you would do that? And they're like, well, yeah, our separation from our wives is growing difficult on us, and we're concerned about their ransom. So he says, whatever soul Allah wants born will be born, and whatever he doesn't, won't. So he doesn't say, no, don't do that. In fact, then there's a whole fiqh on whether or not a husband is allowed to withdraw without getting his wife's consent. And then, like I said, this one article I was reading on the concubines, they said it's generally accepted that, you can withdraw from your concubine so you don't knock her up, because then her child is a Muslim and you got to take care of him. So the concubine doesn't have to consent to that. The other point of the article was the concubine doesn't have to consent to being enslaved. You can marry her to somebody else. She doesn't get any consent in being married to someone else. So why all of a sudden would she get this agency to be consent to sex, And then the other side of the argument is, well, you have to treat your slaves well. So I was Googling it, and Abbas and Imran, I don't know, the EF Dawa guys, a video of them in Speaker's Corner came up, and a guy who said he was a Muslim, but, he gets this argument from non-Muslims all the time about concubines having to consent or not. Sex slavery, and they're all like, oh, it's not sex slavery. That's, we don't have slaves the way, the transatlantic slaves were, blah, blah, blah. And then they said, they give a story of there were like 7 brothers who had this one female slave who cooked and cleaned for him. And the youngest brother got upset with her once and slapped her in the face. And she went to Muhammad, and Muhammad, they come and they apologize, and they're like, sorry, he got a little angry. Never happened again. And Muhammad said, well, free her. That was his punishment. And so if you're going to free him like that, you can't be raping him. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. So anyways, I think it's in Muslim or Bukhari.
Okay. Oh, maybe send that one to me when you have the chance. I was going to send you something, wasn't I? Oh yes, I was going to ask you not to forget to send me your exchange with Orthodox Muslim.
Oh, okay. It wasn't my best showing. I was only slightly drunk, but these guys, they like to talk over and stuff. I thought he was going to be a little more, well, that's why I kind of mentioned it back to the echo chambers thing. I thought he was going to be a little more like, I don't know, academic and stuff. But his channel's like, he calls it the bakery. Like, the bakery's open. Oh, I baked them. I guess he's taking cooked over to baked now or something.
Right.
He's in Toronto, I think. So he's a Western raised, maybe not even 30. So I think he was raised on the internet. He's very much, I won every argument. His chat's all like, oh, you cooked them, blah, blah, blah. And then if you go to, like, he talked to God Logic once, I think it was. And then you go over to the Christian channels and they're like, oh, you cooked him. Oh. That's when you were talking about debates. I was like, well, who's going to judge them? Because
well, thank you for returning to that subject. So what I propose in this age of computer generated transcripts is to identify the sound arguments in each speaker's speech. So the one that makes the most sound arguments that are unaddressed wins. Isn't that fair enough?
Well, you're going to have to write like an AI program to do it. And then you're going to have to be concerned about who's writing the AI program. Because like I said, I mean, what, you're going to get atheists to judge the religious guys?
No.
Because there's like no impartial jury out there.
No.
Everybody
Okay.
thinks their side wins. On a rare occasion, there's like people go, man, that was bad. if the Christian does a really, really bad job, or the Muslim does a really, really bad job, you can get some people from their side to agree it was a bad job, but it's really, really rare. They all think they're winning all the time.
Yes. So I was thinking, if you break down everybody's speech into a transcript of what they said, then you can identify sentences that contain sound arguments, can't you?
Yeah.
And then
who's judging what sound?
Well, okay, a valid argument is a logical argument, but it may not, in fact, be true. So a valid argument would be along the lines of, if toasters were gold, if toasters were made of gold, toasters would be valuable objects. But we all know toasters are not made of gold. But so it's just a valid argument. But for a sound argument, what you would have is Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Right. That's a sound argument.
Yes. So nobody's going to say, oh, but Socrates isn't a man, he's a woman, or crazy stuff like that. So I think
but when you're talking
religious,
when you're talking about religious stuff, it's not that sound, right? Like, I bring up Gog and Magog to the Muslims. How can they possibly be living trapped in a mountain range in the east? And there's got to be trillions of them. Throughout time, what are they eating? How are they disposing of their waste? How is it we haven't found them? They're part of the unseen. What does that mean?
I would ignore.
They're children of Adam. How are they part of the unseen?
Well, I would just ignore the eschatology and the unprovable stories.
But that's what shows religion is false. It's
but
unprovable, silly stories.
Well, actually, no, because it can certainly be argued that we are here because there was a creation, and because there was a creation, there must have been a creator, and those who believe in the Abrahamic God believe that the creator was the Abrahamic God. So there.
Yeah, and I believe there was no creator. I think the universe is eternal.
So are you denying the Big Bang?
No. Why would I have to deny the Big Bang? The
Well,
universe,
because the Big Bang is when the universe
the
came into
current universe,
being.
but it came
Okay,
out of
so you're going to say that the universe is a bit like a yo-yo.
possibly. I don't know if this is the first bang or one of many. We don't
Well,
know. But so the Big Bang came out of pure energy, right? Isn't that the
yes.
theory? Right? There's like a
It,
pinpoint of pure
it,
energy
it
that exploded.
singularity, and then according to this verse in the Quran, I don't know. You think of this singularity as what's it called? A panata? What? It's full of sweets. Is that what it's
Pinata,
called?
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
panata. And then God with his stick came along and smacked the panata, and all the
Yeah.
bits and pieces of sweets came out, and that was the universe that we have now.
Okay. Maybe the pinata just exploded on its own, right?
Um. Well, okay. Maybe I can try this line of questioning on you, Mike. You'd like to believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished in this life or the next, wouldn't you?
Sure. Within a society, yeah.
Well, just anyway, you'd like to believe that good will be rewarded in this life or the next. Because I mean, if we're just
Well,
going to go by this
there's
life,
no
then
next,
there's not an awful lot of good that is being rewarded.
right. Yeah, there is no next life. And there is no karma in this world. There's no instant karma. Many very bad people have lived very good lives. Many good people have lived bad lives, I'm sure. Yeah, there's
Yes,
no justice
so
in the
if
universe.
we just go by this life, then there is an awful lot of evil that is unpunished and a lot of good that is not rewarded, and that is why you need the afterlife for you to be able to believe that perfect justice is possible.
Yeah, why do you need to believe that?
Well,
I
because
mean,
we
you got to
want
be
to.
insane to believe perfect justice is possible. Obviously, there's
Well,
no.
it wouldn't be impossible. Sorry, it wouldn't be illogical to believe in that if you believed in the Abrahamic God, because
Sure.
the Abrahamic God is supposed to be omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly moral.
Yeah, it's not illogical. It's just silly. It's like having a binky or something when you're 25 years old. It's like sucking
A
your thumb.
what? A what when you're 25 years old?
A binky, like a little blanket that babies hold. It's like
Oh,
sucking your
right.
thumb when you're 50 years old because it comforts you.
But don't you think believing that good will be rewarded and evil punished helps us to act correctly and helps us actually to, martyrdom is required in the Abrahamic religions, isn't it?
I don't
It's
think it's
actually a
required.
requirement in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
I don't think it's a requirement. I think there's a great reward for it. I think it's encouraged. But even the Muslims, certainly the Shia, have I always just call it Taqiyya, whatever, Tiqqiyya or something. Where
Takia.
yeah, that's a Shia lying to a Sunni, saying he's not a Shia, so the Sunni doesn't kill him. So that's trying to avoid martyrdom. So I don't think it's required, but yes, they venerate their martyrs, obviously. Justin Martyr, Peter, when he was crucified upside down. Look at the.
But in a way, aren't men required to martyr themselves when they're expected to, defend territory and, women and children, even if they don't
No,
believe in God?
no, not really. They're not required to. Again, this
I
this is
suppose
kind
you
of
could
like
be a deserter,
this is
but
kind of like.
then,
Well, no, you can retreat. I mean, Muslims retreated. This is like even the samurai. People say, "Oh, the samurai never retreated." I was watching a thing on one time, and this guy was like, "Well, there's many writings of samurai saying, we were in battle, we were losing, we fell back to regroup, we retreated. This whole no retreat thing came out of when there was actually when the shoguns got united under an emperor, and there was peace for like 200 years. Pretty much. There might have been little skirmishes here and there, but that's when
mhm.
like the samurai became poets and stuff. And, they still practiced with their sword and practiced being warriors and stuff, but there were no wars to fight. So they sat around writing poetry and thinking and philosophizing. And one guy wrote a book saying, we should never retreat, or we will never retreat. Well, that guy never was in a battle, you know. So, I mean, even I can't remember his name. It wasn't Ben Khalid, the Sword of Allah, but there was another guy who was kind of like a general under Muhammad, or a lieutenant, I guess, and they were going to some fortification and they couldn't get in, and he had like 4 guys grab a sheet or a shield or something. He stood on it and they threw him over the wall, and he killed 5, 6 guys and came out and opened the gate, and they won the battle. And then after the battle, Muhammad said, you know, to Omar, or, you know, the other top brass guys, they said, don't ever put that guy in charge. He's too reckless.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think martyrdom was required. There's hadiths where Muhammad's sleeping and one of the wives is picking lice out of his hair, and he wakes up smiling. She said, what are you smiling? He said, oh, I saw this dream, and so was carrying the flag of Islam and he was martyred, and he falls back asleep. And then saw another guy martyred, saw another guy, and then fourth guy picked it up and we won the battle and he wasn't martyred. And then the woman's like, well, I hope I can be martyred. He falls back asleep, he wakes up and he says, you will be, or something. And they all smile. So they like martyrdom, but I don't think it's a requirement.
Well, the Jews have something called sanctification name, and it's basically saying that if a Jew is forced to murder someone or commit adultery, he is to, or bow before idols, he is to sacrifice his life. But if he's forced to eat pork or you know, other stuff, he is allowed to submit. But on these 3 matters, committing adultery, killing someone, or bowing before idols, he is obliged to martyr himself. And they have a special name for it called Kiddush Hashem. So
yeah,
it is an obligation.
I could see that being the same in all 3 of them, that you can't, you know, in Islam, you can't commit shirk. In Christianity, you can't deny Christ publicly or something. That, yeah, let them behead.
Well, I mean, Muslims do say jihad is an obligation. So you're obliged to, you know, fight when you have no choice. But if you can't, and then they say, if you can't fight, at least speak against it. If you're too afraid to speak against it, you are allowed to hate it in your heart. So, you know, it's quite flexible, really. But I think, generally speaking, I mean, if you're defending your territory against an invading army, I guess men are supposed to defend their territory because they're expected to risk or sacrifice their lives in, you know, because they're men.
Sure. You're definitely expected to go into battle in defense of territory and the religion.
Well, even, I mean, I think all men of all races and nations are expected to do that. Or it's implicit. It's implicit in being a man, isn't it?
Sure. If you're physically capable. There was it after the Battle of Badr? There was a dwarf who went to Muhammad and said, you know, I couldn't take part in the battle because of my stature. Is there anything I can do? Muhammad said, go out on the battlefield and start picking up any weapons you can find. And then he came across Abu Jahal or something like that, Jahl, who was a great enemy of Islam, and he was still alive. And the dwarf stepped on his throat, and he's like, tiny shepherd, your foot is in an exalted place or something. And then he ends up taking the guy's sword and cutting his own head off, cutting, you know, the wounded guy's head off, and brought his head to Muhammad. And it's interesting, Muhammad didn't like chastise him for killing a wounded guy or for bringing him a body part or any of that. They seem to celebrate it, but Muslims will tell you you can't, you know, desecrate bodies or kill the wounded after a battle. They have a lot of rules that Muhammad broke. You know, you can't kill women and children, but in the night raids against the pagans, they killed women and children. Of course, not on purpose, but still they killed them. You're not.
Oh well, nobody's perfect.
Right. You're not supposed to cut down trees, but fighting the Banu Nadar, he ordered trees and cut and burnt down. So these hard and fast rules the Muslims claim to follow tend to get bent quite a bit.
Well, rules are made to be broken, and I think that's an English saying.
I think it is. Most sayings are English, at least in English.
Mm.
I looked up a lot of the American sayings we have. They all come from England. All right. Well, anyways, hopefully you get another guest on. It's 3:00 here. I need to get back out in the yard. Now the midday sun is gone.
Okay. Thanks for coming, Mike.
You have a good one. Good luck with your crazy ideas.
Thank you.
We keep talking. Go over on the Orthodox Muslim there.
Is he on?
He's on like every other day. I think it's usually, come to.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got anything much to say to him, I guess. Other than why aren't you accusing these Christians of idolatry? They have no defense.
There you go. Oh, the Solution podcast. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, Octavian.
No.
Octavian. He's a Black British guy. He's a Catholic. Very confused in this new world. You got a Black British Catholic, and he's going to be dating or debating the Fachiz. Have you ever heard of that guy?
No.
Feachaz.
No.
He's a Black Muslim. He's also up in Toronto, I think.
Right.
He booted me off his channel. I don't know if I'm officially banned, but he kind of nicely asked me to stick to my cracker channels. But I kind of like. Well, his opening is like an homage to Malcolm X. So he says, "Family, friends, haters, everyone's welcome." And I got on 2-3 times, and then in the chat, I kind of derail things to where I want them to go. And that kind of pissed him off. Stop this. Go stick with your cracker channels. I'm like, okay. But, so those two are debating on idolatry.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which is more idolatrous, Christianity or Islam? I'll ask the Solution.
Christianity, of course.
You would think. But
of course, Muslims don't have idols of Muhammad.
No, they get upset if you have a statue of Muhammad.
Yes.
In fact, did you know that the Supreme Court in the U.S. has a big frieze, a relief of 18 ancient lawgivers
on North Wall,
and one's Muhammad.
Yes.
He's tried to get us to sandblast his face away at least, and Rehnquist said no.
Yes. Tell them to get lost. How dare they?
But we have removed 2 statues of Muhammad from New York City, I think, that were on courthouses.
Oh, no. What do they look like?
I don't know where they took them. I have to look into it. But I think the Pakistani and the Indonesian ambassador to the UN saw them and bitched and moaned. So the liberals in New York City said, "Oh, sorry, we offended you. Let us remove those right away."
Oh.
I think they removed the statue of Teddy Roosevelt in front of a library or something because the BLM guys were upset with it.
Why do they do that?
I don't know. The BLM guys wanted the statue of Lincoln removed from Washington, D.C. That was, I think it was even designed by an ex-slave, and it was mostly donations from ex-slaves to build it. But it is, if you just look at it, it's like Lincoln standing there and like a couple black guys, like, on the ground, like looking up to him in shackles. It's like the white man's just standing over these black guys or something. But it's supposed to be that, he helped break the chains, whatever. Right.
That sounds fun.
I think they left it up.
I hope so. Just silly, all this banning.
I'll see if the Solution podcast guy wants to pick your brain on the idolatry, what the Muslims will argue against Christianity, although it's pretty obvious. We got a lot, Christians have a lot of statues and whatnot, and the deification of Jesus, obviously.
Yes. But just because you have a statue of something doesn't mean you worship the thing.
That's true. It's like you can't say they worship the Kaaba, even though they all point to it to pray.
Yeah, and they bow to it too. But I suppose they can say, well, we don't think it's Allah. It's just a ritual.
Right. Or kissing the black stone. That seems very pagan-esque to me, but
Yeah, but think it was there before Muhammad was born. So I
right.
guess it goes back to pre-Muhammadan times.
Right. And the pagans worshipped it. You know the story where it fell off its pedestal and the four powerful or the powerful pagan guys were arguing over who would get to pick it up and put it
Hmm.
back on its pedestal. And so they
Oh,
asked
oh yes, and Muhammad said, put it on
on a
a
carpet.
piece of a carpet,
Yeah.
and you can all pick up the edges so
Right.
nobody gets. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I guess he ultimately placed it back on the pedestal. I mean, somebody's still got to pick it up. I don't think they managed to roll it right in the butt. But anyway, it's funny.
Yes.
The Muslims are like, oh, see, he was known as a righteous and
Such a
honest guy,
diplomat.
even to the pagans.
Yeah.
But that it wipes away your sins seems kind of weird.
What does the what bowing?
Touching or kissing the black stone. That's why it's black. Apparently, it started out as white, but it's absorbed so many sins that it's turned black. When it was given to Abraham, when he built the Kaaba, it was white or something.
Oh, but it was a comet originally, and I suppose the reason why the ritual continued was because it was kind of to get the Meccans who were still pagan when Muhammad returned to Mecca.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it,
Just like the Christians weaving in Easter and Christmas with the pagan holidays.
well, I was going to say that the Book of Common Prayer still blesses the Holy Catholic Church. I mean, it's the Anglican Book of Prayer, and I years ago I noticed that it still blesses the Holy Catholic Church, and I thought, oh, why? Because I thought you weren't that fond of the Catholics after you established the Church of England, and they said, oh no, it's the universal church, churches everywhere, and some rubbish like that. But you sort of know that Henry VIII, when he started the English Reformation, didn't want to change anything because he knew it would upset people if you changed even, one little bit of the ritual or one word of the prayer, and he knew people would get upset. So I think that would be the reason why these apparently pagan rituals were continued, because he didn't, want the, Meccans at the time who were still not Muslim. I mean, that was the only way he could, compromise with them and say, well, your prayer rituals are still the same. Well, we're not going to kill you. You can join in, and it'll be, it'll seem the same.
Yep. That's the way you do it. Slow and steady.
Yes.
All right. You have a good one, Claire.
You too. Thank you.